Yeah, Mbolo Vinagatalamai, ladies and gentlemen. Tuisavu again here from sunny Victoria, Australia. And today is Saturday, the 3rd of December 2022. So just 11 days away from the general elections. This video the inspiration came from the amount of goodwill and positive comments from those of you who liked the breakdown of the numbers that I had provided in one of my earlier videos. And in particular, talking about the 5% threshold and the importance of the 5% threshold. And I was actually giving you numbers. And these numbers are not pulled from thin air, but actually the numbers come from the 2018 general election joint report, which was put out by the Electoral Commission and the Supervisor of Elections. And that's on their website. So if you www.feo.org.au or FJ, I believe, if you look at there, you can find it under the election results. So these numbers are from there, and you can fact check that. And I think you should do that as we're leading up to the elections because of the kinds of ludicrous claims that's been made by certain parties, and in particular, namely the Fiji First, which is unbecoming of a ruling party, but I think it just shows the desperateness. Now, if you look at the figures, I've got two blocks. Sorry, I've got my envelope opener that I'll be using as a pointer. But if you'll see behind me, I've got two columns, and here on the my right, which would be your left when you're watching, is the 2018 general election statistics. And then opposite on the other side is that I've got the 2022 general election statistics. Now, the only number there that is confirmed from the 2022 is the registered voters, because that's the one that has been put out by the Supervisor of Elections. And the actual voted turnout, that's just a projection that I'm using, and that projection is based on the 2018 general elections, where 71.9% of the voters turned out. So I've used that same projection and projected from the registered voter numbers and using the 71.9%, just so I could get some kind of figures and being able to come to that projected, again, 5%. So you can have an idea of what political parties, the number of votes that they need to get before their votes are actually counted. Now, for those of you who may not know, is that the actual electoral system in Fiji today, that's one that's been imposed there by Qayyum in his 2013 general elections, the constitution, sorry, is that for an electoral a party to have their votes counted, they need to reach the threshold of the 5%. And the 5% is not from the actual number of registered voters, but actually from the number that actually voted. So for instance, if you look back in 2018, the total number of registered voters, total numbers, was 637,527. 637,527. Now, those who actually turned up to vote, whether it's in Fiji or around the world, whether by face-to-face voting or poll voting or postal ballots, it came to 458,532 voters that actually voted. And that was, so the actual voters, the number, was 71.9% of the total registered voters. So when I'm saying this is the important number. The actual number that voted was 458,532, because it's from that number that the 5% is taken from. And that's the threshold. In the last election, 2018, the threshold of the 5% was 22,917 votes. So for a political party to have its vote counted, they had to reach the 22,917. If they were below this number, this 5% threshold, then their votes weren't counted, was wasted. So when I'm using the word wastage and not counted, it's because of this 5% threshold, which arises from the number of actual voters. One other thing that's very important it's not highlighted in the actual report, is the number of people who didn't vote. They only talk about the 71.9% of that's out of the total registered voters. But those who did not vote, the numbers was 178,995. Now that number, out of the total registered numbers, so that those who did not vote, that made up 28.1%. That's more than a quarter of the registered voters. That is a high number. That's why I used that word in the last election. In the last video. It's a high number. It's unacceptable. And now you have the supervisor of elections reading some of his press releases, showing concern that the voter turnout may be lower than what was back in 2018. You know, elections is the right of every citizen. Every government is duty bound, obligated to make elections as simple and easy as possible. Yet Fiji is one of the few nations that I know in the world. Now, I was involved in the last elections here in Australia. I was, I volunteered to put up my hand as part of, my duty as a citizen of Australia. And I was just astounded and amazed at just how transparent and how easy the process was. The ballot papers easily identified the members. But in Fiji, the Fiji First government has made it very, very difficult, intentionally, to fool the voters and make them confused. They've taken away the right of political parties to name themselves the way they want to. SDL was forced to change to Sodelpa and not use the Fijian word Songo. Then the Fiji First removed the restriction that political parties could not use symbols next to their names, removed the names of the candidates, and now issued numbers. That's ridiculous. That just shows that this government is hell-bent on trying to confuse the voters. That's why you're ending up with 28.1% of people who did not vote. That's a high number. And, for the opposition, and even for members, for those of you who support Fiji First blindly, I ask you, is your government so transparent as they claim to be? Why make it so hard for the general elections? Why this year, making it on a Wednesday? Come on, Kayo. Why are you doing this? You're just so desperate. That should have been done on a Saturday where everybody is free to attend and not make it harder. That just shows, you guys are so scared that you're going to lose, so you're trying to put as much hurdle. And I ask for all the voters in Fiji, be wise. And if you look at the last election, the 22,917, which was the 5%, Fiji First got the most with 227,000 votes, 241, which entitled them to 27 seats. Sodelpa followed with 181,072 votes, entitling them to 21 seats. Then NFP with 33,515 votes, they entitled to 3 seats. The Unity Fiji followed with 6,896 votes, well below the threshold, 0 seats. Hope, 2,811 votes, well below the threshold, 0 seats. And Fiji Labour Party, 2,800 votes, well below the threshold, 0 seats. And yet these numbers, if you had added them together, that's over 10,000 votes. Now, if the 10,000 votes had gone over to Sodelpa, that could have changed the election. That's why I'm saying, it's very important. Put aside your biases. Politics is a game of numbers. If the opposition, if you truly want to topple the Fiji First government, then you need to coalesce together. Now, that's from the 2018 general election, which we should learn from. Now, let's look at these elections that's going to happen in 11 days. The total registered voters that's been put out by the supervisor of election is 693,915. So 693,915. Now, that's an increase from the last general election by 56,388 voters. 56,388 voters. Now, using the same 71% turnout at the last general election, on that number, you'd end up with 498,924 votes. Now, 5% of that is 24,946. That's gone up by about 2,000 more than from the 2018 general election. So that's the number that the political parties would need to get. Again, I'm just basing on the 71.9% turnout. There are some indicators showing that the actual voter turnout may be higher, contradicting what the Supervisor of General Election is concerned about. So imagine if the projected votes rise anything above the 71.9%, if it goes to 72% or 73 or even reaches 80%, then the 5% threshold just continues to go higher and higher, reaching 25,000, possibly 30,000. So you can see the small political parties who had 6,000, 2,000 and 2,000 votes in the last election, what realistic hope would they have of now getting this threshold in this general election? So my plea to the opposition and to the members who are watching this video, politics is a game of numbers. Our common objective is to topple the Fiji First government. So we should coalesce. So DELPA is going to be greatly hampered, I think, given that there's been a mass movement away from the last election. Actual numbers are yet to be seen. But either way, for the small parties, I would seriously ask you to reconsider, if you want to preserve your numbers and votes, I would ask you either form a coalition before the general election with the bigger three parties. At the moment, unfortunately, it seems the main contest is between Fiji First against Rumbuka and the NFP. Again, I may be wrong, but that's where from a lot of the indicators. And it's going to be sad is that if we keep fighting amongst ourselves, the opposition, that we allow the Fiji First to slip through again. Hope you found this useful, and I ask that you please share this amongst your friends. God bless Fiji.